Let's continue discussing the name of Surah Fatiha. Another name of Surah Fatiha is Quran. Now, which literally means as the source or the origin of the Quran. Now, in Arabic means the origin of something, the source of something, and also the summary of something. It is also used, the word is also used for mother in Arabic. So, in this sense, Quran is Surah Fatiha is the summary of the Quran. It summarizes the topics of the Quran, and all the topics spur out of all the topics of Quran spur out of Surah Fatiha. And broadly speaking, there are 6 subjects in the Quran: Tawheed, which is the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala; Risala, which is prophethood; Akhirah, which is the day of judgment; Ahkamat, which is the religious law; Takhweef, which warning for people who disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala; and Tabshir, which means glad tidings for people who obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we'll discuss how all of these topics are mentioned in Surah Fatiha in the next slide. Let's discuss how all of the 6 topics that we saw on the previous slides are mentioned in Surah Fatiha. Now in the first 2 verses, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, let's read the first 2 verses. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The translation of these 2 verses are: all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, most gracious, most merciful. Now in these 2 verses, the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned. He is mentioned as the Lord of the worlds, Rabbul Alameen. In verse 3, which is Maliki Yawmiddin, which translates as Master of the Day of Judgment, the Day of Judgment is mentioned in the 3rd verse of Surah Fatiha. Now verse 4 and 5, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمُ. Now in these 2 verses, Ahkamat, or the religious law, is mentioned. Na'bud in this verse includes all the ways of praying, and As-Sirat al-Mustaqim includes the religious law. And in these 2 verses, we acknowledge that we follow the religious law, and we acknowledge that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone who we worship, and it is Him alone who we ask for help. Now in verses 6 and 7, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. The translation is: the way of those on whom you have bestowed your grace, not of those who earned your anger, nor of those who went astray. Now Tabshir, which is giving glad tidings, is mentioned through An'amta alayhim, and Takhweef, which is warnings, is mentioned through Al-Maghdubi alayhim. So An'amta alayhim, which translates as the people who you have bestowed your grace upon, include the prophets alayhimus salam as well. As mentioned in Surah Nisa, verse 69, the people on whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed His grace include an-nabiyyin, min an-nabiyyin. So the prophets alayhimus salam are mentioned as those people. So all of the 6 topics, Tawheed, Day of Judgment, Ahkamat, Tabshir, Takhweef, and prophets have been mentioned in Surah Fatiha, and in that sense Surah Fatiha is the summary of the Quran. One last name of Surah Fatiha that we'll discuss is Ta'lim al-Mas'ala. Again, if you need more details, you can always refer to the books of Tafseer and ask genuine scholars about further details of the names of Surah Fatiha. But we'll discuss Ta'lim al-Mas'ala now, the 3rd name. And as you as we saw in the translation um, of verses 5 to 7, that we say that إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, you alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ, keep us on the right path, the way of those, the last verse translates as, verse 6 and 7 translate as, the way of those on whom you have bestowed your grace, not of those who earned your anger, nor of those who went astray. Now, it is clear from these verses that we are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that sense, this surah is also called Ta'lim al-Mas'ala, which means that in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us how to pray, how to make dua, how to invoke Him. So therefore, some scholars also refer to this surah as Ta'lim al-Mas'ala. One last thing before we formally start the tafsir of Surah Fatiha is the number of verses in Surah Fatiha. Now, the opinion of the majority of the Ummah is that there are 7 verses in Surah Fatiha. And this has also been mentioned in Surah Hijr, verse 87, that وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِّنَ الْمَثَانِ وَالْقُرْآنَ الْعَظِيمِ. And we have certainly given you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 7 of the often repeated verses and the great Quran. Now there are other opinions about 8 verses and 6 verses, but these opinions are not usually accepted. These are considered as shadh aqwal. So shadh means that they're rare and they're not usually accepted.